The New York Giants are firing Brian Daboll. My thoughts on the move, why I think this is the right move, but at the wrong time, and also the impact of Joe Schoen remaining with the organization. All this and much more coming up on Rich Sports Talk. I promise you, you're not going to want to miss this one. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rich Sports Talk, your home for all the latest and greatest on New York sports. Again, thank you for joining us here on YouTube. You can check us out wherever podcasts are available. And also make sure to get into the live stream. Give us your thoughts. Give us your comments. Again, super chat to jump to the front of the line. Check us out wherever podcasts are available. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our latest videos. So the big news, of course, today, Brian Daboll has been fired by the New York Giants. I have a lot of thoughts at many different levels of the organization, but this is what we know right now. The Giants released a statement earlier today about the situation. I'm pulling that up right now from Ian Rappaport. This was the statement coming from the Giants organization. The New York Giants announced today that head coach Brian Daboll has been relieved of his duty. Assistant head coach and offensive coordinator Mike Kafka will serve as the interim head coach. He spoke this morning about the direction of the franchise on the field, and we have decided at this time that it is in our best interest to make a change at the head coaching position. President John Mara and Chairman Steve Tisch said in a joint statement, "The past few seasons have been nothing short of disappointing, and we have not met our expectations for the franchise. We understand the frustrations of our fans, and we will work to deliver a significant improved product. We appreciate Coach Daboll for his contributions to our organization. Wish the Daboll family all the best in the future." So I have a lot of thoughts on this. My first thought is this. I think that this is ultimately the right decision for the New York Giants. I just think that this is the wrong time for this decision. And I understand wounds are fresh, and I understand Giants fans' frustration. Again, another double-digit point-blown lead, another game where this team is looking up at the end of the game saying, how the heck did we not finish this game? I understand the frustration seeing Jackson Dart running these power sweeps as a quarterback who's under 220 pounds. And look, I get it. I understand. And I personally hated the decision-making by Brian Daboll. I thought it was idiotic to put his quarterback in that position, especially when he's been to the blue tent not once, not twice, not three times, 4 times this season. But this to me is a bigger problem. And when we came on this show today, I had a major question about one part of the organization that has seemingly been answered. Now, again, things can change, but I'll get to Joe Schoen and his impact on the organization. But here's what I think. Brian Daboll deserved to be fired, but I wouldn't do it now. And I would look at the New York Jets across town. Yes, the Jets were in a different situation last year. But when you make Mike Kafka, who is the offensive coordinator, whose only role is designing plays and coming up with play calls for the offense, now you put him as the head coach. And you put him as the head coach now when you look at the tough stretch of games that they have coming up. The Giants have a brutal schedule coming up. And you saw it with Jeff Ulbrich for the Jets. It's one thing to be the coordinator, but to then all of a sudden not only be the coordinator, but the head coach of the team is completely different. And say whatever you want about Brian Daboll as a head coach, about his defense not closing games. And yes, I understand he made the decision to look at this defense with Wing Martindale, make a change. And I thought that this was not a great change. The defense has not been great. I understand that. I understand that they haven't closed out games. But the biggest thing for this season, and I've said it time and time again, was the development of their young quarterback, Jackson Dart. And look, Jackson Dart has been very good this year. Jackson Dart has also shown the ability that he can make plays and that he could potentially be this franchise quarterback. It doesn't make sense to me that this organization is taking that guy away from him the last 8 games of the season. I understand Jackson Dart might miss a game or two with the concussion, but this season is getting the most out of Jackson Dart and helping him develop. Is it going to help Jackson Dart now, the remainder of the season, that his potential play caller, his offensive coordinator, now is going to get overwhelmed because now he has to handle double the duties being the head coach of this team? I don't think that's going to be good for his development. And at the end of the day, the biggest thing for this team was the development of their young quarterback. And I think this is a detriment. Look, I agree Brian Daboll should be fired, but I think that the timing should have been at the end of the season. I know a lot of Giant fans like this move, but I'll tell you from experience, when you fire a coach in season, it does not usually get better. It usually gets a lot worse. So I wanted to do this before I talk about Joe Schoen. And it's interesting, when we look back at this regime, the pairing of Brian Daboll and the pairing of Joe Schoen, what is the theme between these two? And I was really thinking about it before I came on the show today. And I think that we will remember this regime as the what ifs. There are a lot of moments in their tenure as the New York Giants that I looked at this situation. I go, if they had done this decision instead of this decision, where could the Giants potentially be? And people are going to say, well, what do you mean by that, Nolan? I think when we look back at this history, what if, let's go back to the first year. What if the Giants are good, but they don't make the playoffs? Again, they go 9-6-1. We know what happens. They play the Vikings. They win on the road. They boat race Minnesota, and then they go to the Eagles and they lose. But you're like, oh, wow, the Giants have something here. If, let's say they didn't make the playoffs, but they looked a respectable 7-8-1. Let's throw that as a hypothetical. At the end of the season, they go, you know what? We like Daniel Jones, but we don't love him. We're going to look for a different quarterback. That could have been a different scenario potentially for this team. Another what if is that same offseason. You make the playoffs. You like Daniel Jones, but you don't love Daniel Jones. And I think one of the reasons that this decision was also made, to be honest with you, is I think that this ownership group looks at the success Daniel Jones is having this season and is frustrated that this coaching staff wasn't able to get more out of Daniel Jones and that he's able to go somewhere else and have success. But that's neither here nor there. When I look at this team, I look at that offseason where you had, after the playoff run, you had a decision. You could have franchise tagged Daniel Jones. Again, would have been incredibly expensive. And you could have signed Saquon Barkley to a long-term contract. But instead, you give Daniel Jones franchise caliber money. You gave him again, not a super long contract, but you gave him a very hefty price. And you franchise tagged Saquon Barkley. And at the time, you worried, would that annoy Saquon? Would that hurt your long-term chances to keep Saquon here in New York? And ultimately, that turned out to be the case. Another what if, and again, this was highlighted on HBO Hard Knocks offseason, which again is a decision I feel this organization was not happy with, is the owner tells this front office that he wants them to keep the running back, the star running back, Saquon Barkley, and they let him walk, and he goes to the Eagles and wins the Super Bowl. What if the Giants had kept him? What if they had traded him before that? What if they got pieces for him? Another what if. That same year, what if they traded up in the draft? They were trying to get up to get Drake May or Jane Daniels. They could have given a Godfather offer. They decided not to. What if they had done that? They didn't. They waited. Another thing is, what if they just got a clean slate? What if the Giants just made the decision to fire both Daboll and fire both Joe Schoen at the end of the upcoming season? Just said, you know what? It's just not working. We need a fresh start. Where could they be right now with what head coach? And I do have a couple of head coaches, two in mind in particular, that I want to talk about. But to me, it's going to be the what ifs. What if Daniel Jones was able to stay healthy? What if this team had made certain draft decisions for this team? And looking back, I wonder, when we look back at the end of the day, what if they had done a couple of these decisions differently? Where would the Giants franchise be today? Again, comments, super chat to jump to the front of the line. Would love to get your reactions on the Brian Daboll situation. Again, Brian Daboll was fired this morning by the New York Giants. Mike Kafka will be the interim head coach. So before I get to potential coaching candidates, and I talked about this earlier in the show, that I think that this was ultimately the right decision. I just would have let Daboll finish the season. But if you're a Giant fan, I think you have to have major concerns going forward. Because there is a decision that, again, it's not in stone. Things can change as we go forward the season. But I want to bring up John Mara for a very important reason. You want ownership to not be overreactive. And to me, this just screams a move that they were overreactive, because they made this decision this morning, but let's be frank, they made it on the plane ride home last night. According to sources, and again, Sean Marash reported this on WFAN. He has a lot of ties in the Giant organization, that there were thoughts that members in ownership wanted Daboll fired after the Bronco debacle. And again, it was a horrendous debacle. But cooler heads prevailed. Daboll still kept the job. I kind of feel like yesterday was the final straw. It was the perfect storm. It was a game where the Giants had another lead that they couldn't finish out. Jackson Dart not only gets hurt, but looks like he might be out for a decent amount of time. And it also was Caleb Williams, one of the quarterbacks the Giants maybe could have tried to trade up in that great quarterback class, and they didn't go up and get a quarterback. I think it was just the perfect storm, and basically, they just looked at this and get, you know what? We're done. We're moving on from this decision. And I think John Mara, this is the thing we have to talk about. He reminds me, and again, people are going to think I'm nuts with this comparison. He's kind of getting to the Jerry Jones level of making decisions. I know that the New York Jets take a lot of heat in New York, but the Giants do a lot of the same things. If I was to basically flip the jerseys and the logos for the last 10 years, you could not tell these two organizations apart. And one thing with John Mara, when it came out that he was diagnosed with his sickness earlier this year, I wondered how that was going to impact his decision-making, because he's looking at that he doesn't have much sand left in the hourglass, and if he would do some bold decisions. And apparently that seems like it's come to fruition. So they made this decision. This clearly to me was a very emotional decision. There's a lot of frustration within the organization. But like I said, you could fire Daboll. I just think that this whole season is about developing your young quarterback. And unfortunately, what you just did was you just put your young quarterback in a horrible situation when he eventually comes back. Now you have his OC being the head coach, having to deal with all that comes with it, plus being the OC. And you took away the champion, the guy that really supported Jackson Dart, the guy that really supported him and was the one that wanted him here is out of the building. So you wonder what that will do to this kid's confidence. And if he regresses down the stretch, the Giants only have themselves to blame. So I was originally going to come on. We'll talk about some head coaching options. Again, Super Chat, jump to the front of the line. Comment on potential coaches you would like to see or any questions you have for the live stream. Again, check us out wherever podcasts are available. And like and subscribe to miss any of our latest videos. There was something that I was very curious about. And if I'm a Giant fan, this is what would really terrify me. Now, again, we don't know if this will change by the end of the season. But this was according to Ian Rappaport 1 hour ago, and this to me is the greatest fear I would have for the New York Giants. According to Rappaport, Joe Schoen remains in his position as the general manager. But here's the big one. Will lead the search for a new head coach. We feel Joe has assembled a good nucleus of talent, and we look forward to its development, Sinmar. Unfortunately, the results over the past 3 years have not been what any of us want. We take full responsibility for those results and look for the kind of success our fans expect. Hold on one second. The good young nucleus of talent by Joe Schoen. Do I think Joe Schoen's been a bad GM? No. But I don't think he deserves to go and select this. And if your argument is going to be, and again, I think that there's a bigger picture here that really would concern me with the Giants. But if you're going to allow Joe Schoen to select the next head coach, I think this is going to be an absolute disaster for the Giants for multiple reasons. And I'll tell you, you as a Giant fan do not have to look far to see where this has failed before. Joe Schoen, if this front office, if this ownership group is looking at Joe Schoen as finding the quarterback, my God, they have had the wool pull over their eyes. From every conceivable story and every news outlet that covers the New York Giants, who is the one that wanted Jackson Dart? Wasn't Joe Schoen. It was Brian Daboll. Joe Schoen, it has been reported that the room was split on Jackson Dart, but it was basically Brian Daboll begging the Giants and the GM to pick this quarterback. And basically, if that's Joe Schoen defense, like, hey, I'm the GM that picked the quarterback, I deserve to keep my job and pick the next head coach. That to me is absolutely asinine, because Joe Schoen is also not traded up to get one of the great quarterbacks in the draft where we saw with, Drake May. He could have traded up for Drake May. Probably look a lot different. Probably Brian Daboll would have saved his job. And Joe Schoen, can I also put this out? We talk about this defense, right? This vaunted defense and the talent. I keep hearing the word talent. Let me go back a little bit. Joe Schoen has had plenty of drafts, right? Okay. Let's look back at Joe Schoen, the drafter. Let's look back at his first draft, shall we? It was a draft that I said was going to be an incredibly decisive one for both New York teams. Now, one of those players for the Jets has already been traded, but in 2022 was his first draft, okay? Who did they draft? Kayvon Thibodeau with the first overall pick, with their first overall pick, 5th overall. 23 and a half sacks. Has he been a good player? Sure, but is he a top 10 player in a draft? No. Evan Neal has been an abject disaster. Wan'Dale Robinson, nice second rounder, but not something you really think. I mean, Joshua Azuda, 33 games, okay. Cordell Flott, Daniel Bellinger, Dane Belton, Micah McFadden, DJ Davidson. Not a great draft. Okay, let's go to his next draft, 2023. Deontay Banks, disaster. John Michael Schmitz, not great. Jalen Hyatt, not great. Eric Gray, not great. Okay, let's go back to 2024. I mean, that was the Malik Neighbors draft. I mean, come on. That was a great pick. Okay, that was a good pick, Malik Neighbors. Who else did they pick? Tyler Nubin in the second round. Andrew Phillips. Okay, a little bit better, not great. Theo Johnson. Okay. Tyrone Tracy. Let's look back at 2025. Abdul Carter. Half a sack as the number 3 overall pick. Darius Alexander. Cam Scadaboo's been good. Marcus Embo. Okay. I'm looking for the talent, and I don't really think that this is a talented group. The problem is, too, like, if you want to look at someone to blame for the state of the Giants, look at this general manager. Look at this defensive line. When I came into this season, I thought that this team had so much talent in the defensive line that they could somehow find leads. This pass rush would be great. Think about how many resources just to the defensive line. The D back room, they've invested a ton of high-end picks. I'm talking day 1, day 2 picks. But just the defensive line, and you can even take out Dexter Lawrence because that was the previous regime. They've invested 2 top 5 picks in their edges. And they've also invested multiple picks and a ton of money in Brian Burns. And this defense is absolutely horrendous. And here's the other thing, too, which I would be concerned about a Giant fan. Again, comments, super chat to jump to the front of the line. If you're the Giants, Joe Schoen is going to limit who's going to come here. Because if you want a legitimate head coach, they're going to want to have a lot of say, and they're going to want to pick the GM. And if you want to see an example of how this could go badly, just look across your stadium. Look at the New York Jets. The Jets' timelines have been screwed up multiple times by this keeping of a GM and moving with a head coach. I can tell you it doesn't work. And not only does it work, it fails spectacularly. The Jets should just clean house with Rex Ryan. Instead, they kept Rex as the head coach, but that limited who would want to come and work for Rex Ryan. So they got John Idzik, who was one of the worst GMs ever. Then they decided that, okay, we're going to fire Todd Bowles, but we're going to keep Mike Maccagnan. Mike Maccagnan picks Adam Gase to be the head coach, right? Gets to pick the draft. Then a week or 2 after the draft, oh, by the way, we're moving on from Mike Maccagnan. It wasn't really working with Adam Gase, so we're going to bring in Joe Douglas. What? And then Joe Douglas gets to pick his head coach with Robert Saleh. And that didn't work. So if you're the Giants and the fans, you want a clean break. Joe Schoen, what has he done to deserve this roster? Like, what does he deserve to earn this chance? Like, he's not a proven GM. He's not someone that has really done a great job. And when you look at the talent for this team, I look at a lot of players that have gone a lot of other places and done extremely well. I mean, Saquon was here, and he goes to Philadelphia and wins a Super Bowl. We've seen them turn on former talent, let them go in free agency. Not only do they go have great careers, they look like superstars in other places. And the biggest concern to me is this. What has Joe Schoen done to prove that he can build this offense up? He spent a lot of capital on this defense. It's been horrendous. Malik Neighbors, I mean, that to me was a layup in that draft. You look back at 2022, he could have drafted Garrett Wilson or Drake London in the first round as their number one receiver. They didn't. They drafted Kayvon, who was solid. And even last year with Abdul Carter, they brought him in. I'm like, okay, they'll move on from Kayvon. They'll exchange him to help fill out this offense or get an offensive piece. I'm just looking and I'm saying the offensive line, they've taken some swings on day 3. Their early day 2 picks have not worked out with Evan Neal and John Michael Schmitz. And look, in free agency, I think they've done enough to patch the offensive line, but they haven't really put this offensive line in a great position to succeed. I just don't think they've done a great job at putting this team in a position to succeed. And part of me also looks at building this roster. Was Abdul Carter the best defensive player in last year's draft class? Sure. But did the Giants really need another edge rusher? They needed more weapons on this offense. They needed to support a young quarterback. And you look back at the draft and you look back and you went, was it really worth it to take him there? And I look back at even I look back at the last two, the 2024 draft and the 2025 draft, and I'll throw this out there. Being a Jet, someone that covers the Jets, would they have been better having one of the picks of the Jets used on offensive line, Olu Fashanu or Armand Membu? Because their offensive line is not great. And when I look at the 2025 draft class, it's just to me like, yeah, Scadaboo was a great pickup, but the reason that Joe Schoen gets to keep his job is he found Cam Scadaboo in round 4. That to me is not worthy of keeping him. And if your excuse is, well, he found Jackson Dart, well, he had to be convinced by the head coach. It wasn't like he was like, we're taking Jackson Dart no matter what. But again, I guess when the GM quote hits on the quarterback, he gets to keep his job. So again, if I'm a Giant fan, I'd be terrified because to me, if you were going to say, look, we're going to evaluate Joe Schoen at the end of the rest of the season, which again really isn't evaluating, but the fact that this is true from Rappaport, that Joe Schoen gets to pick the next head coach of the Giants, that to me is absolutely asinine. And it's going to deter a lot of great candidates because here's another interesting question that you have to ask now. If you are the New York Giants, if you are the Giants and you're looking for a head coach, are they going to want to work for Joe Schoen? If they say you have to work for Joe Schoen, that's going to limit your pool. But the other thing too is, do they want to work with Jackson Dart? That's a question you have to ask because Giant fans love Jackson Dart. But if the ownership basically says you have to coach Jackson Dart, that might also turn off people. Like, let's say the Giants, because again, the Giants' schedule is brutal. You look at Tankathon, they're going to be in the top 5. What if you get a new head coach that comes in here and says, look, guys, I like the roster. I don't think we're far away. Right now, the Giants would be picking the top 3. We're not sure what this quarterback class is going to look like. Obviously, a lot of kids have the option to go back, but let's play a hypothetical. Let's say whoever the new coach of the Giants comes in, let's say the draft looks like it is today. Giants are picking 3rd overall, Tennessee. But if the Giants' new head coach comes in and says, and Joe Schoen and him work together, let's say they're on the same page, and both him and the new coach come to the ownership and say, look, we know you like Jackson Dart. I know he sold a lot of jerseys, but we think Mendoza is going to be a better fit for what we're going to try to do here. Will ownership sign off on that? And to be honest, I'm not sure. Look at ownership. They were very hesitant to do it with the last star player they had, Saquon Barkley. Are they going to allow this regime to make a move? Because again, if the Giants are picking in the top 3, that is a possibility. And if you're telling coaches you have to coach Jackson Dart and you have to work for Joe Schoen, what kind of coaches are you getting? Because for me, the Giants really need a former head coach or someone with head coaching experience. And I just look at this market. And who's Joe Schoen going to hire? Is it going to be another Buffalo assistant? Is it going to be someone that's on the current Buffalo staff? So I don't know. And what makes you think he's going to be the right guy to pick the right head coach? Like, is he going to, if Kafka plays well, if the Jackson Dart does well down the stretch and Kafka wins 2 or 3 games, will they all of a sudden decide, I don't know, make a different move? I mean, is there a world where, again, McDaniel worked in Miami from 2013 to 2016? I mean, does he go back somewhere in the Dolphins organization, bring someone in? So I just look at it and I just don't like the Giants, the timeline, and I just think it is a horrendous decision. But again, this might not be over. I do think that, again, these owners in the New York area, they do listen to the fans. They do listen to what the pulse of the city is. And I feel like Giant fans are going to be red hot that Joe Schoen that is not only not on the hot seat or on the way out, but he's going to have the opportunity to pick the next head coach. This is, someone too that Daboll can recognize talent. Brian Daboll is going to get an offensive coaching job. Let's not forget, Daboll wanted to take Jackson Dart at number 3. He didn't want to chance it. And if Joe Schoen, says, he's my guy, he's the guy I want, well, why didn't you pick it at 3? You don't risk it. Basically, the GM reluctantly traded back into round 1, late round 1, where it's like, okay, this isn't going to kill us. Let's get you your quarterback. And the coach that wanted this quarterback, that was screaming for this quarterback, is the first one to go. And I understand it's bad, but at least let Daboll finish the season. Get squeeze as much juice from this orange as you can, just so you can have Jackson Dart develop. Because look, if this hurts Jackson Dart's development, he's not going to have Brian Daboll in his ear. He's not going to have Brian Daboll's opinions. Kafka's overwhelmed handling the head coaching job and handling all the new responsibilities. That's on this team. So this is definitely a spot too where, again, I could see the Giants moving up and down within the draft, according to Joe the Jet. Again, super chat to jump to the front of the line. But I just don't get why Joe Schoen, when you look at his draft history, look at his free agency history, I don't think the Giants have a good roster. The Giants don't have good corners. The Giants don't have a good offensive line. I just don't see this. So this gets me to my next point. I had 2 potential head coaches. I think one could still be in play with Joe Schoen. But if I was the Giants, and again, I don't think this will happen if Schoen stays in place, but again, we'll see if he's here by the end of the season. To me, the top coach on my list would be Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy developed Aaron Rodgers. He's a great guy to work with quarterbacks. He worked incredibly well with Dak. Again, the biggest thing with him is he didn't win the big game in the playoffs, but guess what? He got them to the playoffs, which is something that I think needs to be appreciated. And the other thing, too, is I always look for a little extra in a head coaching hiring. You don't think Mike McCarthy would love the opportunity to stick it to Jerry Jones and the Cowboys twice a year after they fired him? I think Mike McCarthy would be a great selection for this team. The problem is, number 1, is he going to want to stick with Jackson Dart? Does he like someone better in the upcoming draft? But number 2, Mike McCarthy is a big presence. He's going to want to pick or have a major say in the personnel. Is Joe Schoen going to let up? And right now, I don't think he will. But there is another dark horse that I think is out there. And yes, at this time, it sounds crazy. But this is someone that I think, especially if he convinces Joe Schoen that he will let him work together, I think you cannot rule out Bill Belichick, or at least the talk of Bill Belichick to the Giants. Because it is very clear that the Giants respect Bill Belichick. How do I know about that? Who have been the last hires for the Giants? Let's see. Bill Parcells or Bill Belichick disciples. every single one of them. The Giants have not gone outside the Belichick tree for a long time. It's because they respect Bill Belichick, they appreciate Bill Belichick, and they have a soft spot for Bill. Bill Belichick is in a desperate situation right now. It has been an absolute disaster in North Carolina. And it's clear to me he wants to get back in the NFL. And to me, the Giants are the one team in the National Football League that I at least think will have him for an interview or at least talk to him for multiple reasons. Number one, it's clear that this ownership respects him. They honor him. They really like what he has. They really like him as a coach. Number two, I think Bill Belichick will say all the right things to this ownership group and convince them why he deserves this opportunity. He'll say, I can just see his pitch now. I believe you have the right quarterback. And if you've seen me, if I have the right quarterback, I can work in this league. But more importantly, I think he's going to come and say, look, I love the talent on your defense. With my mind, I'm going to turn this into a top 5 defensive unit overnight. I could just see him talking, and look, he's going to say all the right things. I want to bring respect back to the Giants. I think it will be great to end my career here with the New York Giants. It will be a come full circle moment where my first Super Bowl was helping this defense win 2 Super Bowls under Bill, and now I get to come back at the end of my career and help restore the Giants' pride, restore the faith in the New York Giants. I think that is something that he's going to preach. He's going to say he's a former head coach. He's got the experience. I think he's going to say a lot of things that this ownership group is going to like to hear. Here's the problem. I don't think Belichick's the right guy because at this point, I think Belichick, the game, it's passed him by. It's clear that this whole weird girlfriend thing is definitely causing a lot of issues. And again, New York, you think it's crazy at North Carolina? What are the headlines going to be if Jordan appears on the sideline for the first Giant game? The back pages of the New York papers might just incinerate from all the gossip that's going to come about this. I just don't know how in Bill Belichick really is at this point. It's clear he wants to only hire people that will say yes to him, that won't push him or try to evolve him. And the other thing I look at, too, is outside of Tom Brady, it hasn't worked. He wasn't able to develop another quarterback with New England. It's clear that New England got tired with him. And with him, he's going to want personnel. Is Joe Schoen going to relinquish some of that personnel control with Bill Belichick? I don't know. But again, I would not rule out Bill Belichick to this team because I just think he's going to say all the things that ownership is going to appreciate, that ownership wants to hear from a head coach. And let's be frank, how many coaches, if Joe Schoen is here, are going to really want to come here? There just isn't a really good opportunity. And look, I mean, I know this is an opportunity for Mike Kafka. They want to see if he can be the head coach. But even if he has success, you really, really need to have I think really someone that's there, someone that is very good. And people are saying this is an attractive head coaching job for the Giants. I don't really think it is, especially now that Joe Schoen's remaining. Don't forget, Schoen did not want to go up for Jackson Dart. And he made it clear this was Daboll's decision. So you look, I mean, this was someone that basically Joe Schoen made the decision. And they basically, Brian Daboll, you know what? It's a 3rd-round pick. Fine, I'll do it for you. So if now all of a sudden, if Joe Schoen's going to have this revisionist history, all of a sudden, hey, I'm the one that found the quarterback, this is something. And look, for the New York Giants, I understand that the New York Jets are a laughing stock. I understand. But if you're a New York Giant fan and you want to stick out the Giants are in such a better position than the Jets because they have their quarterback. Okay. I just want to remind people that over the last 5 years, the Jets are 25-52. Giants are 24th, 53-1. Again, like I said, if you swap the logos on the teams And again, if you really want to go down Jetsian territory, which it appears they want to do, you do this, which is you let Joe Schoen keep his job. You let Joe Schoen keep his, you let Joe Schoen continue to build out this roster. You let Joe Schoen make these picks. Okay. Joe Schoen has had a lot of misses, especially letting talent go. But more importantly, he's made a lot of bad draft decisions. You want to talk about this defense? Well, who's been the guy that's been ordering the groceries for this defense? A lot of them spend Joe Schoen. Abdul Carter, that was a Joe Schoen pick. Kayvon Thibodeau, that was a Joe Schoen pick. Andrew Phillips, Tyler Nubin, Joe Schoen picks. Deonte Banks, that was another Joe Schoen pick. The lack of building an offensive line. John Michael Schmitz, that was his pick in the second round. Evan Neal, 7th overall pick. And looking back at that 2022 draft, and I understand it was his first one, but you look back at that first round in 2022 and who was on the board, the fact that they didn't take a Drake London or a Garrett Wilson, like that to me is something that is, I can't explain it, because I really look at those drafts and I just look at the guys that were available, and the Giants didn't pull the trigger and get one of those great receivers. I mean, that to me is just startling. And I mean, I just don't think he's been a great GM. I mean, I just look at, they picked in round 2 in that 2022 draft. Wide receiver, Wan'Dale Robinson. You know who else was on the board? Just out of curiosity. I bet you're curious, right? You know who else was on the board? You had George Pickens, Alec Pierce. I mean, they've been pretty good guys. I mean, 18 and 12 touchdown catches. I mean, Sam Williams, 9.5 sacks. Oh, Giants in 10, right? Trey McBride, pick 55 to Arizona. A lot of good players in that draft. Just seems like the Giants didn't really want them. Again, super chat, jump to the front of the line. Your comments, your thoughts on the Giants firing Brian Daboll, and more importantly, keeping Joe Schoen. I just don't get it. I really don't. I really don't get how Joe Schoen is keeping his job. Now, again, we see things happening too. I just think it's one of those things too where I just look at it and I go, I just don't really get it. I really don't. I thought that this was going to be okay. We're going to let Joe Schoen ride out the rest of the season. I think you should clean house at the end of the season. Let Brian Daboll go down the stretch. Firing a coach in season, it doesn't do you any good. I mean, look at the Jets last year with Robert Saleh. It just makes it a lot harder. And look, maybe part of this is the Giants in a weird way are trying to lose games, get better draft position. But at the end of the day, I don't get how Joe Schoen is allowed to make the decision. If you're a Giant fan, that to me should be the most aggravating part. Yeah, I personally would have fired Daboll at the end of the season. But I get fans that want their pound of flesh. I understand the fans want accountability. I get it. But I also look at, too, what is more disturbing to me is Joe Schoen's roster decisions over the years. And if he's making these poor decisions with the personnel, why should he get the say in the next head coach? I mean, he didn't trade up the previous year to get one of the top quarterbacks in the top 3. It would have been a lot of picks, but they would have had a really good quarterback. They didn't do it. They drafted Evan Neal. That's been a disaster. Kayvon Thibodeau has not been a good player. They've overdrafted in the defensive backs. They have not done a good job building that. They have not built a good offensive line. Like, what have they done outside of a couple of good first-round picks like Malik Neighbors, Jackson Dart, who, again, was a Daboll pick, not a Schoen pick? What position group has they built up? And look, they built up this vaunted defensive line. They put all these resources into Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeau, and it's still not working. Like, where have they built up? What has Joe Schoen improved on this roster significantly? I mean, Joe Shane has to keep Gano, who's a kicker that's constantly hurt and has had multiple games where the Giants went into a game without a kicker. So he doesn't have the wherewithal to upgrade the kicking position, but he's going to be allowed to pick the next head coach. I really don't get it. Again, I would love your thoughts, Giant fans. Weigh in. Again, Super Chat, jump to the front of the line about Joe Shane apparently going to pick the next Giants head coach. I just think it's ass with the number 9. I really do. And again, I think they shouldn't have fired Brian Daboll. It's not going to help your Jackson Dart develop. Now, you probably could have told Brian Daboll the obvious: don't design run plays for Jackson Dart. Don't get our quarterback killed. Again, I think that this was an emotional reaction that not only did they lose another game where they lost on the road again, they've lost 13 in a row on the road. They've lost 4 games where they had double-digit leads this year. And I think a lot of it is they're looking at the defense like, well, you picked the defensive coordinator. But, I mean, you look at Brian Daboll, he's an offensive coach. He had leads in those games. Again, they have to close. But Jackson Dart wasn't the issue. And if he regresses down the stretch, that's going to be on the Giants. And one of the big things, too, is your biggest selling point is you want Jackson Dart to play well. What if Mike Kafka doesn't put Jackson Dart in a good position? What if Mike Kafka is the one that's been doing the design quarterback runs, and now Dart gets hurt down the stretch? He keeps getting nicked up. Future head coaches might not want that. If Brian Daboll finished the season, but Jackson Dart was the offensive rookie of the year, then all of a sudden it's a more attractive position for a prospective head coach. So the timing, again, like I said to start this program, do I agree with the move? Yes. Do I agree with the timing of the move? I don't. I think they should just let it ride out the rest of the season. But to me, the bigger story of the day is that Joe Shane is apparently, according to multiple reports, is going to be the guy that picks the next head coach of the New York Giants. And I can tell you from experience that doesn't work. You need to have a coach and GM on the same timeline. Because let's throw this scenario out there. Let's throw this. Joe Shane picks the next head coach. It's bad again. Jackson Dart regresses next year in year 2. What do you do at the end of the season? Do you clean house? Do you fire Joe Shane but keep the head coach and try to pair a GM with this head coach? Do you clean house, but then you've now fired a coach after 1 season and 2 coaches in 2 consecutive years? Like it's just not good timing. And just look at the Jets. The Jets have done this not once but twice, and it has failed spectacularly both times. With Rex Ryan, they brought in John Idzik, but they had to keep Rex. And then they fired Todd Bowles, but they keep Mike McCagnon. They let Mike McCagnon do the draft with Adam Gase. And, oh, by the way, at the end of the draft, we're going to move on from Mike McCagnon and hire Joe Douglas. It's like, then why did we let Mike McCagnon make those picks if they weren't getting along? It just doesn't make sense in the National Football League, and it doesn't work. And I don't get why the Giants are falling into this rabbit hole. Like, does Joe Shane have blackmail on them? Like, Joe Shane, it's not like Joe Shane has assembled an amazing defense. It's not like Joe Shane has addressed the quarterback position. It's not like Joe Shane has built this smash mouth offensive line. If the reason that they're keeping him is because, oh, they found Cam Scattaboo in the 4th round, and they found Jackson Dart, but oh yeah, that was more of a Brian Daboll move. It just doesn't. It just does not make sense. Like, I just don't get what they are doing as an organization, and it just doesn't make any freaking sense. Like, I've seen this time again, and again, this is also the same GM that thought the ghost of Russell Wilson was the right decision, was going to be their starting quarterback this year. Okay. You look at this head coach. I mean, I just don't think this is going to be a great pairing. I mean, the only coach that I think could work. Now, again, I don't know if it will work, but I also look at this. Is there a coach out there that has Belichick, quote, ties that maybe Shane could convince to come and likes the quarterback? One guy that's out there that I think, because again, he fits what the Giants like. Offensive coach. He has some head coaching experience. If he has a good relationship with Joe Schoen, maybe it'll work. But could the Giants hire Josh McDaniels, the OC from the Patriots? Again, McDaniels has been a former head coach. It didn't work, but at least he's got previous head coaching experience. He's an offensive side of the ball guy. I mean, he might be one of the best options right now. Like I'm I'm not kidding. I think he might be one of the best options in terms of, of the guys out there. So again, we'll have to see what happens. But if you had to ask me today, that might be their best option. It's an option where even I think some Giant fans are going, I don't know. I don't know if it's a great fit, but I just don't get how Joe Schoen, what has Joe Schoen done? What has Joe Schoen done to earn the opportunity to select a head coach? Because it took them forever to pick the quarterback. And that was the excuse. Oh, give us the quarterback. Well, you got the quarterback and it didn't work. So Brian Daboll fired. Again, my final thoughts here. I don't think Brian Daboll should have been fired until the end of the season. I think it's going to stunt the development of the young Jackson Dart, which I think is a bad decision because this whole season is about developing him. And I think the biggest story of the day is this. If the Giants ownership allows Joe Schoen to pick the next head coach and expect it to change, and look, I know what they're thinking. Oh, well, the Bears didn't get rid of their GM, and they allowed him to hire a head coach, and it's working. That rarely works in the National Football League. And the thing with Joe Schoen is, what makes you think that he is going to be able to build these great teams? Because, again, so far, he hasn't built a good offensive line. He's put a lot of resources into this defensive line, and it hasn't paid fruition. He's put a lot of resources into the defensive backfield, and it hasn't come to fruition. Look, there's been good picks. I'm not going to say he's been a horrible GM, but it's not like this is a GM that's built this incredible roster, or found all these incredible guys. And if the reason is, well, he found Jackson Dart, which, again, was a Brian Daboll pick, and he found Cam Scatterbo, that's your reason for letting him pick the head coach, I think that is incredibly backwards thinking. And look, you're the New York Giants. If you want to make this decision, you can. But I'm just telling you now, I don't think it's going to work. I just think Joe Schoen's going to limit the talented people you're going to get. I think you're going to probably, if Joe Schoen's your GM, probably roll the dice on another first-time head coach. Maybe Josh McDaniels becomes available, but we'll have to see. But if this team goes in with a first-time head coach and it doesn't work next year, and this team's once again 2-6 by week 8, what do? This to me is just restart everything. Just start with a clean slate is what I would recommend. But if the Giants want to go down this path, it's their decision. I just think it is not a well-informed decision. That's going to do it for this episode of Rich Sports Talk. Make sure to check us out wherever podcasts are available. If you like the live stream, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our latest live streams. Again, check us out and bash that like button to get us into that YouTube algorithm so we get out to more great sports fans out there. Again, thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. Brian Daboll's out. Joe Schoen's still in, and apparently is going to be making decisions on the next head coach, at least for now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for Rich Sports Talk. We will see you next time.